waves crashing against the wreckage of their ship, washed ashore on a desolate, war-torn coast. The sky, streaked with dark clouds and distant smoke, served as a grim reminder of the world they had left behind. Now they were stranded in a land that had fallen to chaos long ago. The world had been plunged into conflict, leaving pockets of survivors, scavengers, and soldiers to battle for what remained. But the most feared force in this apocalyptic wasteland was the mercenary group known as the Three Kings. Led by a deranged ex-soldier known as the Jester, they ruled the wasteland with an iron fist. His lieutenants, the King of Spades, the King of Hearts, and the King of Clubs, each commanded their own brutal regiment, enforcing the Jester's vision of violent control. The Jester, with his unsettling smile and erratic behavior, had transformed from a war hero into a ruthless leader. He delighted in the madness of the world, seeing the chaos as his stage. The Three Kings carved their territory out of the wasteland with bloodshed, pillaging anyone who dared to cross their path. But the Three Kings weren't the only threat. Two other factions fought for their survival: the United Security, USEC, and the BEAR, remnants of the old world special forces, now turned to scavengers and mercenaries. The USEC, once a corporate military force, was cold and calculated, with high-tech weapons and a ruthless mentality. BEAR, on the other hand, was a faction of elite Russian soldiers with a loyalty only to their own, hardened by years of war. The survivors had no weapons, no supplies, just their wits. They quickly learned that the coast they had washed up on was deep in contested territory, and they had tumbled into the midst of a battle. The Three Kings were at war with USEC and BEAR, fighting for control of the last remaining resources, while civilians like them were either recruited or slaughtered. As they ventured inland, they came face to face with the horrors of the wasteland. Abandoned cities crumbled, survivors scavenged through debris, and smoke rose from the ruins of skirmishes. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a potential threat. The survivors knew they had no choice but to align themselves with one of the factions or risk falling prey to the Jester's twisted game. But even alliances were fragile. USEC and BEAR were just as dangerous, each driven by their own agendas. Word spread quickly that the Jester and his Three Kings were closing in on a new cache of weapons, a prize that could shift the balance of power. The survivors, desperate to find a way out of the wasteland, realized that this would be their chance, not just to escape, but to turn the tables on the mercenaries who ruled this land. But in this post-apocalyptic world, trust was a luxury, and betrayal was as certain as death. Chapter 2: The Dead Walk. Ere the survivors, 5 in total, moved cautiously through the ash-choked streets of a ruined city. The jagged remains of skyscrapers loomed overhead, their broken windows like gaping mouths. Shattered vehicles and burnt-out husks of buildings lined the road, remnants of a world that had collapsed long before they arrived. Their breath was heavy under the weight of tension, knowing they were deep in contested territory. Each step felt like a roll of the dice. "We need to find weapons, or we're dead," said Logan, the de facto leader of their group. His voice was low, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. He was an ex-cop, built like a linebacker, and one of the few who managed to stay calm after the wreck. "The Three Kings, USEC, BEAR, they're all gunning for us, but we've got another problem." Jenna, a former nurse, gave him a sharp look. "We haven't seen any of them yet." Logan's gaze shifted to the horizon, where dark shapes occasionally flickered just beyond the shattered buildings. "That's because they aren't the only ones out here." The others didn't need to ask what he meant. They had all heard the rumors. The dead walked these lands as well. The cities weren't just battlegrounds. They were feeding grounds for something far worse than mercenaries and soldiers. Stories of the undead had started after the collapse, when the air had filled with strange toxins and disease ravaged the world. Survivors spoke of creatures with rotting flesh and hollow, hunger-filled eyes, wandering aimlessly until they caught a scent of the living. "I've heard they don't need to see you," Marcus, a wiry man with nervous hands, muttered. "They can smell you, like animals. Let's just stay quiet and move," Logan ordered. "We'll deal with whatever comes. First we need weapons." After what felt like hours of picking their way through the city, they stumbled upon what looked like an old military outpost. The chain-linked fence surrounding the facility was torn apart, and the entrance to the bunker had been blown open. It was a gamble, but they had no other options. "Stay close," Logan muttered as they entered the compound. "This could be the break we need." The inside of the bunker was dark, save for the faint flicker of dying lights. Broken crates littered the floor, their contents long since scavenged. The survivors fanned out, hoping to find anything useful. Ammunition, weapons, food, anything. It wasn't long before Marcus called out, his voice trembling with hope. "Over here!" He lifted an assault rifle from the wreckage, a grin breaking across his face. But before anyone could celebrate, a low guttural sound echoed from outside. The survivors froze, their eyes locking in silent fear. Jenna whispered, "What is that?" The sound grew louder, like a dry rasping, moaning carried on the wind. Logan gripped the rifle, his knuckles white. "They found us." From outside the bunker they could hear it clearly now, shambling footsteps, the dragging of feet on asphalt. Slowly, the survivors peeked out through the cracks in the bunker's walls. In the dim light, figures moved in the streets, their bodies twisted and decayed. Skin hung loosely from their bones, some missing limbs, all with vacant, lifeless eyes. Zombies, dozens of them, roamed the area, drawn to the scent of the living. "Jesus," Marcus gasped, backing away from the window. "Stay quiet," Logan hissed. "If they don't see us, maybe they'll move on." The dead moved sluggishly at first, but then one of them paused. Its head snapped up as if it had caught a scent on the wind. Its hollow eyes turned directly toward the bunker. "Too late," Jenna whispered, terror creeping into her voice. The creature let out a loud, inhuman wail, and as if responding to a signal, the horde surged forward. Their once lumbering steps quickened, and they rushed toward the bunker, their mouths open in grotesque hunger. Logan's heart pounded. "Everyone grab what you can, we're going to have to fight our way out of this." The survivors scrambled, grabbing whatever weapons they could find, though there was little to go around. A few rusty knives, a half-loaded pistol, nothing that would last them against the horde, but they had no choice. The walls of the bunker were thin, and the dead were already pounding on the doors, their moans echoing like a nightmare chorus. Suddenly, another sound pierced the air, the unmistakable rumble of engines. A convoy of armored vehicles rolled up the street outside, their headlights cutting through the gloom. Black and silver banners waved from the trucks, the symbol of the Three Kings. "They're here too," Jenna muttered in disbelief. As if this couldn't get any worse, the vehicles stopped, just in time for a group of soldiers to jump out, weapons raised. Among them stood a man in a red trench coat, with a gold crown insignia stitched onto his chest. The King of Hearts, one of the Jester's notorious lieutenants. "Form up. Clear the area," the King of Hearts commanded. His voice was cold and ruthless, as if the undead swarming the streets were just another obstacle in his path. "The Jester wants this place secured. No survivors." The survivors inside the bunker were trapped, zombies pounding from one side, the Three Kings advancing from the other. They exchanged terrified glances, realizing that there was no way out. "Logan," Jenna said in a trembling voice, "what do we do?" Before Logan could answer, the undead broke through the first layer of the barricade. Rotten hands reached through the cracks in the walls, clawing and tearing at anything they could find. The survivors fought them off with whatever they had, but it was a losing battle. The dead were relentless. Outside, the King of Hearts and his men opened fire on the horde, cutting down the zombies with surgical precision. But for every one they killed, more swarmed forward. The gunfire only drew more of them from the shadows, and soon the streets were a writhing mass of undead. "We're not going to make it," Marcus muttered, panic rising in his throat. Logan tightened his grip on the assault rifle. "We're going to fight our way out. We'll let them," he gestured to the Three Kings' soldiers outside. "Clear a path, then we run." It was a suicide plan, but it was the only option they had. As the undead swarmed the bunker, and the Three Kings unleashed hellfire in the streets, the survivors braced themselves for the battle ahead. Between the dead and the mercenaries, survival seemed impossible. But in a world like this, nothing was ever easy.